Tonight on Zadanza, there's a brand new apologist riding into town, and he might just prove Jesus so good that we can't stay atheists.
Yeah. Scary stuff. Scary
We are going
stuff.
to talk about all that and maybe more on
Zadanza.
uh,
Greetings. Hello. Hello, friend of mine. Zod Almighty. Mr. Z. What's the haps?
I've officially changed that channel to Mr. Zod, by the way, just so I can still be Zod and just so it's not confusing. And also Mr. Z is just a completely stupid name. And
No, come on. Come on. No stupider than Prophet Zod, I'd say.
that's probably true. But at least Zod sounds like something. Z is just like, hey, Mr. Z.
I do like that you changed it because Zod is a bit more distinct than just Z.
Yeah.
You know? So
And as somebody pointed out soon after I started that channel, there's like a bunch of other Mr. Z's on YouTube. So it's like, what the hell? All right. That was stupid.
well, anyway. So
Well, one plus side of that name, as Shiver said, Mr. Z sounds like he has a secret base in an active volcano.
it's true. It sounds like a Johnny Quest villain for sure.
So yeah, Biddy, I agree. Zod fits me better. That just feels like my internet name now. And like you can't totally abandon that. It just feels weird. That was part of it too. It was like I just feel like people are all of a sudden calling me something else. Anyway, let's get to tonight's show because we have just a jam-packed hour and a half of just a super crazy, talented or something apologist who everybody is talking about. I had no idea. This is Wes Huff or Wesley Huff. I had no idea this guy existed until Dan suddenly messaged me within the last week saying, "Hey, have you heard of Wes Huff?" He didn't text me in that tone of voice, but still, that's just.
Well, here's what it was. It was like the day after we did last week's show, I think. I was like, hey, this Christian apologist was just on Joe Rogan's show. Have you heard of him? He's got kind of a weird background. You're like, no, I hadn't. It seems whatever. And then like over the next course of a couple days, I see Zod slowly descend into the rabbit hole that is Wes Huff, getting way further than I have. So he was like, well, now it's a show and tell show tonight. We're gonna have Zod tell me what research he's found about Wes Huff. And Paulo Gia also in that time made a great YouTube video about it. So shout out to Paul.
And I want to acknowledge so Dan brought this to my attention, and suddenly this phenomenon just became fascinating to me. I have to acknowledge something. Paulo Gia made a great video about this, basically summing up the phenomenon and everything that's happened. So go watch that if you haven't yet. I have to say I am not an expert in any of this subject matter area. Neither is Dan, as far as I know. And I'm not here to talk about all the technical details of what he does with texts and manuscripts and where he was wrong. There are a lot of videos out there about things he's just gotten blatantly wrong. And there are also people who are better at talking about a lot of that part of this than we're ever going to be. So we're not trying to tread on that territory. This includes Kip Davis, who is in our chat right now, who is actually a scholar of that kind of stuff. And so, we're not hitting here pretending to be knowledgeable. What I am interested in is the phenomenon of a new apologetic star rising, because this is the fascinating thing to me. It's not what Wes Huff knows and doesn't know, and what his area of expertise is, and what he trips up on. The way he trips up is a little interesting, but only as a sub part of this whole phenomenon of him stepping up into the limelight and suddenly being a pig apologist. So what's interesting to me is how suddenly he became a star, why he became a star, what apologists and other Christians are just so excited about, what he does that gets them so excited, and then what he does when he shifts from his everyone talks, I think, about his scholar mode to his apologist mode and what his apologetics actually look like. So what I want to do is we'll recap real quick his whole his whole rise to stardom and what happened. And then, given how excited everybody is, I want to just look at some of his apologetics and just see, what are we actually up against? Once this guy rose into stardom, I think this all started just last Thanksgiving. Who is this big star?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
And Joe Rogan's part in this, of course. My prediction is that Joe Rogan will publicly convert himself to Christ by the end of 2025. That's my 2025 prediction. He seems beyond that. Also, I sent you a message about this. I don't really think you responded because, like, after Wes Huff was on, Mel Gibson was on and also started talking about Christianity a little bit, but then also ivermectin conspiracies. He said ivermectin cured cancer and stuff. So that's cool. That's really awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic.
But yeah, cool stuff.
So to understand Wes Huff and the Wes Huff phenomenon, I think you have to look back to William Lane Craig and what he means to Christians and how they behave because of him. One of the first things I learned when I started doing in YouTube atheism is I did a couple videos about William Lane Craig, and they got a lot of views by the standards of me back then, which we're talking about probably in the hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 back at that time. But Christians got really bent out of shape by any criticism of William Lane Craig. And what I learned is that, and this has stood up over time since then, William Lane Craig is more important to a lot of Christians than Jesus Christ himself. And in his own compartmentalized way. Or you can almost insult Jesus sooner than William Lane Craig without getting them upset. And I think the reason is Jesus fills a certain place in their minds and is important to them in a certain way. But depending on what you focus on most, just kind of like Trump is more important than Jesus to a lot of evangelical Christians because he fills a certain political need and speaks to their more specific current ideals and social identities and grudges against society. He speaks to that more than the abstract idea of Jesus. William Lane Craig does as well. And so when you insult William Lane Craig, you're insulting what they think is the last bastion of apologetics. He's there as this big, strong tower of invincibility. And he is, that no matter what argument goes which way, every atheist at some point is going to have to run up against William Lane Craig. And when they do, they're going to dash into pieces and all their arguments will be destroyed. As long as he's in their back pocket, they feel better about everything. And I think you have to understand the phenomenon of Wes Huff in light of that. You look like you're looking to say
that's an interesting thesis because I'm just thinking about the different apologists that have come into mind. And we also are extremely biased, right? Because we are in particular atheist circles, so we hear about some that maybe have undue influence or not as much influence, right? But is more known in our circles and stuff. Like if you ask the average Christian who Ken Ham was, I'm not even sure if they could tell you. Maybe they'd know him as the guy that debated Bill Nye the Science Guy, for example, right? But I would say there's probably even more people that know, not saying influenced by it, but even know who Ken Ham is than even a William Lane Craig. I think William Lane Craig, as you put it, is a bulwark almost, but in the apologist sphere, not necessarily in the average Christian sphere.
Yeah.
That would be my take. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the average Christian sitting in the pew might never know who William Lane Craig is, or they might hear his name come up alluded to by a pastor or an apologetics nerd or something like that.
I'll put it this way. I didn't know who William Lane Craig was until I got into YouTube atheism stuff. I didn't know about him when I was a Christian. So
I first learned about him when I was first in college, and a couple people would talk about apologetics, and then he came to our campus. That's where so you could spend a lot of your life not knowing who people like that are. But I'm talking, when I say Christians, I don't mean all Christians. I mean people within the apologetic sphere.
Yeah.
So what I think, basically, it's a confidence game. He exudes confidence. I would call him a confidence man, not in the sense of a con man, but you look to him for a sense of confidence, and he gets by projecting that more than he gets by actually making any specific logical point. He says it, he exudes a certain amount of confidence and authority, and that makes Christians feel assured. And so they praise him and support him for that reason specifically. They're looking for that emotional feedback from him. And so What I think Wes Huff is the next person who came along and he injected that little bit of energy. And after apologetics may have been in the doldrums for a little while, I think a lot of the old guard has aged. William Lane Craig is not exuding the same energy and the same level of confidence as he used to. He's getting a little old and saying stupid things here and there, just not articulating well.
Yeah.
And so suddenly onto the scene burst this Wes Huff. And so it's kind of like when you point your telescope at the right part of the sky and you see a star forming. I think we are seeing a star form at this moment.
Yeah.
And it's just very, very interesting to me.
Yeah. I'm trying to be as fair as possible, I guess, because like I'm thinking about like Alex O'Connor. Like you and I both knew Alex before he even had like 50,000 subscribers. Now he's like, well, how big is he now? He's huge, right? And it's like some people graduate and evolve from the spaces that they're in just by chance or maybe expanding out. I'd say Alex still talks about atheist stuff, but he also talks about like general politics stuff, right? Like William Lane Craig and all of these apologists, like they've also tried to expand and talk about social issues, and none of them are hitting on that front. You know, maybe like Dinesh D'Souza, right?
Yeah.
So like it's interesting to see like how different figures, different spaces just kind of evolve, and like what are the reasons for that. And Wes Huff, I agree with your assessment. I think it's, you know, William Lane Craig kind of out, right? Kind of had his day in the sun. No one's really going to him anymore. Wes is kind of filling in that space of being energetic enough to clap back, kind of in the same way that William Lane Craig would do in these kinds of real confidence stuff. But like, you know, is he substantially different? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. So I want to play a little clip. This is a very, very short clip. I pulled this from the beginning of Apologia's video. Again, like I said, Paul did a great summary on this, including a lot of the issues surrounding his rise and some of the things he got wrong. So go watch that. I couldn't suggest that strongly enough if you want to understand who this guy is. But I just want to play this first few seconds of Paul's video where he just played clips of apologists gussing over him, because nothing I can say can ever capture the energy of what's happening, at least as suggested by this edit. So let's just watch that real quick.
All right, let's do it.
Atheist. Wes Huff flames YouTube atheist.
Wes Huff just set the standard for debating non-Christians, and it was an absolute bloodbath.
Wes Huff, he is the man of the hour. At least he is in my life.
Dude, Wes, hands down, without question.
What?
The best stuff I've ever seen.
Right.
Wes has successfully refuted every claim that Billy made.
And you had this boss move where you just sort of reach upon, you're like, actually,
Wes Huff, 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 Wes Huff.
That's that's a great like little intro that Paul puts together. Shout outs to Apologia. If I had to pick another real one in this community, Apologia definitely deserves every subscriber he has.
Oh yeah, for sure. Obviously,
he makes great stuff, and still on that shit. You know what I mean? Like Paul's a real one. We just talk about people who change and evolve in the space. I don't know if Paul's changed at all, and that's a great thing. You know what I mean? Still doing the same stuff, and that's really good for him for that. But anyway,
the stuff he's focused on has evolved some, in the style of the channel, but yeah, he hasn't really shifted out of that space and started going into weird directions. He's very disciplined in his message and the way he puts his stuff together.
Yeah.
These people are just gushing over this guy and about what he means for apologetics. We have Cameron, our best buddy, saying that he sets the gold standard for how to respond to non-believers, right? Or skeptics. We have, what's his name? Inspiring Philosophy, talking about how he made his little boss move by reaching back and grabbing a book. What happened in that instance, and this is all covered on Paul's channel, is he was in his debate with Billy? I'm forgetting his name. The silly guy he debated.
Oh, I can't remember his name either. But yeah,
God damn it,
silly guy. Billy Hatcher.
Billy. Billy Carson.
Carson, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So he Billy Idol is okay. This is kind of what I'm getting at. Kip Davis, I want to throw this in there. The crazy thing about this is that it was Billy Carson. To pretend like this was some debating masterclass is just nonsense. Anybody
Yeah.
with a basic grasp of the Bible could do the same thing. So Billy Carson started saying that in this, I think the Sinai gospel is what he called it, doesn't have anything about Jesus being resurrected. And Wes is like, I think you're talking about the, I'm spacing on the name.
The Egyptian.
Yeah, the Codex Sinaiticus or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just trying to, by memory, I don't know this stuff. And he goes, is that what you're referring to? And he kind of nods along and thinks yes. And he goes, actually, I have a copy about it here. He just reaches right back and grabs it right off the shelf and says, he basically refutes his claim, says that this is basically identical to the Gospels. Do you know anything about where it's at? And then he shifts to saying he thinks it might be the Gospel of Barnabas and stuff like that. But really, all that happened, as impressed as everybody was by that, is that he just all he really substantially did was he just debunked really stupid claims by an incredibly silly person. This is a guy with totally fringe ideas. He's a skeptic, at least of, I think, fundamentalist Christianity, but he believes it based on just really stupid conspiracy theories. So to beat him in a debate, like Kip said, it doesn't mean anything. You just, I don't know.
Look, here, let me show you something. Okay. Here is Billy Carson's some of his books on Amazon. Okay, so here's one of them, Compendium of the Emerald Tablets, right? The history of the Emerald Tablets is strange and beyond belief of modern scientists. Their antiquity is stupendous, dating back some 36,000 years BC. The author is Thoth, an Atlantean priest king who founded a colony in ancient Egypt, wrote the Emerald Tablets in his native Atlantean language, which was translated by many famous scholars. We're literally talking about spirit science stuff here. Right? That's who Billy Carson is. Like, Billy Carson is another grifter in a long line of weirdo conspiracy guys. So yeah. To add to your point, like Wes Huff debating this guy is the equivalent of just the average person on the street debating a flat earther. I sure fucking hope they can. Right? Like, it's not that impressive. Any one of us could do it. I know, Zod, you could debate Billy Carson. I know I could fucking debate Billy Carson. Anybody should be able to do it. So like but apologists, you know, the people who follow apologists, they love to get their digs in. And Wes Huff in particular annoys me because the kind of skeptic he likes to argue with are the ones who think that Jesus isn't even real, right? Yeah. There's a lot of emphasis on that. And you know, I know you'll get to it, but anyway, it's a straw man. It's a straw man for what most of us in the community would argue for. Not saying that there aren't intelligent arguments towards that, but it's not the position that most of us ever even go for, right? The whole Jesus being real doesn't even matter. But that was what Billy Carson was even trying to talk about in that debate, was whether Jesus was even a real person, which is, you know,
what he did is he used a lot of charisma and flair, along with some really basic knowledge about, I'm not saying basic and like low level, but some mainstream obvious knowledge, if you're in that field, about textual criticism, and just totally dunked on somebody who just got the obvious things wrong because he's a complete crank.
Yeah.
It would be like if a let's just say in this analogy, Wes is a believer in UFOs. That's maybe equivalent of his belief in Christianity. And somebody who is just like a total crank and doesn't know anything claims that this composite photo was made using Photoshop, or a photo that was done practical effects, and he has no clue what he's talking about. The ufologist is an expert in photography, and he breaks it down and just makes a complete fool out of the guy and says, you know, this clearly isn't Photoshopped, and here's why. And he can give really compelling reasons. Was that cool? Did he dunk on that guy? Sure. Does that do anything to prove that aliens exist and we're being visited by flying saucers? No. So to pretend that those two things have anything to do with each other, all you did is made a fool out of somebody who said something stupid based on knowledge of something not at all related to your supernatural claims. And so, yeah, I think we just have to keep in mind that that's all that happened, is he took some basic mainstream knowledge and proved that a crank was wrong. And a lot of it was theatrics. Like Kip Davis said, no shade, that was a boss move. I will agree it was. I think that was a slick move. It looked really cool.
Yes. If you're a debate pervert, the aesthetics are amazing, right?
Yeah, it was purely aesthetics.
Yeah.
And what I wonder was, is what he did is projected a picture not only of being quick on his feet and smooth, but of just being surrounded by really smart sounding books and just knowing exactly where one was. But did he do that? Did he do that spontaneously, or did he know that Wes Huff, based on the stuff he says, was going to bring up that specific book and had it ready there? Either way, it isn't substantial to actually his arguments for proving Jesus. But to me, it's an interesting question in terms of what kind of star is he? Is he just charismatic enough and thinks on his feet fast enough to make that move, or does he plan this stuff out theatrically? Either way, it's just all show.
Yeah.
So what we've done,
it's a dark path. It's a dark path, and we know people who go down that path. It's a dark path when you get your fame through debate. People, okay? Ben Shapiro does it. Alex O'Connor does it now. We're talking about Alex, right? I mean, like, people you like or dislike, you go down that path. The debate lords, that maybe is always going to be an audience you can capture when you pull moves like that. And Billy Carson is easy pickings, I would say. But hey, it is what it is.
Yeah. The comment that I keep coming back to is Cameron. He's like, that's the gold standard of how to respond to respond to skeptics. So the gold standard of responding to skeptics is finding the lowest hanging fruit you can possibly find and just stomping all over it. Like, cool. Okay. Good job.
I mean, it's fine. Like, again, I would expect an atheist from our community who debated Billy Carson to do the same fucking shit. I would hope they would do the same thing. It just doesn't mean anything to me, right? It just, anybody should be able to do that. Billy Carson does not represent the average skeptic position. I think that's what makes it just kind of weird that this debate is the highlight of everything, right?
So all that said, given that that's all theatrics and it's all kind of empty, let's see what Wes Huff does by way of proving the existence of Christ and the supernatural and proving God. Is he something more brilliant or different, or is he just more the same in a new package? That's the question at play tonight. I think you all know by suggestion what the answer is going to be, but
let's find out.
Yeah. So this one's called "Is Evidence for Jesus Sketchy?" And this is where this is Wes responding to Joe Rogan, where Rogan's talking to somebody else, talking about how Jesus might not exist and the evidence is sketchy and stuff like that. So let's watch it and see what he has to say.
All right.
Historical figure is controversial. There's people that say yes, there's historical documents that show he existed, and then there's a bunch of documentaries that you can watch that, like, boy, the evidence is kind of sketchy.
Gospels that are written about Jesus were written after, right? Not during.
And how long after his death?
Well, I think the first one was like 100 years. Gospels were not written by anyone who had seen Jesus in that way, even though they were the versions of when you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the versions that they were told. So I don't know, maybe 100 years?
Historical data concerning Jesus of Nazareth is certain.
I'm going to pause this real quick. Sorry, Zod. First of all, again, debunking Joe Rogan guests, not the flex you think it is. Mel Gibson was literally on there like 3 days ago, again, talking about how ivermectin helped cure his cancer and his friend's cancer. Okay, so, again, whatever. I don't know who this lady is. Obviously, she's wrong. And Wes Huff is right to point that out. The first Gospels are not dated 100 years after Jesus. It's closer to like 40 years after. I'm not a fucking Christian. I know this. If you're going to talk about it on the world's #1 podcast, you should be really fucking confident. I don't know what this lady's deal is, but she's wrong. So, again, easy pickings for Wes, I'd say.
Yeah. Him dunking on this lady and pretending that it proves Jesus and dismisses atheism would be like us dunking on what Mel Gibson said about ivermectin, and based on the fact that Mel Gibson's a Christian, we just debunk Christianity. Nothing to do with each other. A person went on a show and said something stupid. That doesn't mean that you have done anything related to their broader stance on religion.
Do you know who that lady is, by the way?
No. Someone on Joe Rogan. I don't know.
I don't know either. All right, let's go.
The evidence is not sketchy. The historian, theologian, and Nobel Prize winner Albert Schweitzer stated that it must be admitted that there are few characters of antiquity about whom we possess so much historical information. Even radical skeptics like Bart Ehrman, in his book, Did Jesus Exist?, states that the claim that Jesus was simply made up falters on every historical ground. Joe might be convinced by online documentaries, but anyone actively working and teaching in the fields of historiography, antiquity studies, classics, biblical studies, textual criticism, or any other related field aren't. The reason for this is that if we were to cast doubt on the historical Jesus, then based on the...
Hang on, real quick. He makes a couple moves here that I feel he's starting to make moves that I feel like are just basic apologists. The first one is he's just showing quotes from people saying they think Jesus exists, right?
Yeah, sure.
And he's alluding broadly to the general consensus that there was some historical Jesus. That's great. But I don't know. This just feels like regular apologetics already. What do you think?
No, I mean, this isn't impressive to me so far. I mean, look, this is YouTuber fare, right?
Yeah.
A popular Joe Rogan clip gets out there. You get a response to that Joe Rogan clip to help boost your channel or whatever. Like, this is just standard YouTuber stuff. Like, I don't necessarily have a unique problem with this so far. And I don't see anything he said so far as necessarily inaccurate either. Like, yeah, the broad consensus is that Jesus is a real person. I don't contest that, so it's whatever so far.
Yeah. There's a lot to the consensus about Jesus existing and what that actually means. And that we could go down the whole path, but something about quoting individual people saying that it seems like it's true just feels a little empty and apologisty to me. It doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't feel super, even though the point he's making isn't bad, it doesn't feel super, scholarly-ish to me. By the way, Fletcher from on high, you've caught on to something I actually wanted to bring up. Is he reading from a script? He is very reading from a script. If you watch, his eyes are just, he's not even telepromptering well. You can see his eyes scanning, which is like really distracting to me. It makes it look like, I don't know. It looks very amateur.
But again, this is just YouTuber shit to me. I don't know. This doesn't bother me too much. And like, I don't know, Zod. I maybe I need to push back. I'm pushing back a little harder than I thought I would tonight with you. Not really. I guess I haven't actually pushed anything. I'm trying to bring balance to the force here.
Yeah.
But like, isn't a scholar's job to quote people and to like give proper attributions? Like, I don't think him quoting like Bart Ehrman is necessarily.
No, I don't think it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know if okay. I'm not necessarily saying it's bad or debunking him. I'm just looking for, or is he doing anything different or better than any other apologist?
Okay, sure.
And this feels straight out of the box apologist move.
Yeah, sure. Standard apologist fare. That's fine. Yeah, I agree with that.
But I do want to bring up this eye scanning thing. When I noticed something about the beginning of this that I thought was interesting, just in terms of style and how much I think he's pretty much a showman is his big thing.
Any other related field aren't. The reason for this is that if we were to cast doubt on the historical Jesus, then based on the primary records we have, we would have to cast doubt even more on the existence of any other figure from the ancient world. For example, Jesus actually stacks up pretty well against some of the best attested characters from ancient antiquity. The most powerful individual during the life of Jesus was the Emperor Tiberius. We know about the details of his life from 4 biographers. Jesus, likewise, has 4 biographers. All of the sources for Tiberius came 80 or more years after the events they narrate. Even with the most skeptical dating, we're still only waiting for the first gospel biography of Jesus to be written, coming in at around 30 years after his death. And there's good historical evidence to push that even back to 20 years. And while Mark and Luke...
Okay.
What do you think about this part now?
The only first, wait, look, can I address this? Because I keep seeing this comment. Barney Rubble here in the comments keeps talking about the CIA's operation to mock and demonize full Christ in full force. And that's actually true. The CIA, I'm on the CIA's payroll right now. That's why we're making this video. It's 100% funded by the CIA. So I just want to put that out there. But anyway, on that note,
he's also saying something about ending the Federal Reserve.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Speaking of Billy Carson level cracks, I guess. Cranks. I'm just going to go ahead and not have him involved in this.
Okay, yeah. Sounds good. That's a good idea. So Linda and was it Tim McGrew, who I've talked to, are the only people I know who are pushing like, oh, the gospel's actually closer to 20 years versus the 40 years thing. So
Yeah.
that is, and they're cranks, in my opinion. So that's the thing. That's the thing that's out there. But also, Tiberius, like, again, this is the problem with the apologetic stuff, because like we don't know just about Tiberius because of biographers, right? Like he's talking about biographers of Tiberius's life. There are other people that have written about like what has happened in the regimes of these emperors and stuff, right? Like there's
Can I bring something up from the chat real quick?
yeah.
This is where someone with more knowledge than we have is handy. Does Wes fail to notice that he is showing a statue of Tiberius that was carved in his lifetime? We have coins with his face on them.
yeah. That's yeah. Again, like I think that's kind of alluding to my point. If you're just talking about pure biographies, sure, but that's not the same thing as people writing or mentioning or talking about these historical figures. And this is a fallacy that comes up not just with Tiberius, but they'll also talk about Julius Caesar in the same sense, right? It used to be Julius Caesar was the one that they always bring up. But it's like, okay, yeah, if you're talking about specific people that wrote detailed accounts about it, yeah, that's going to be a bit more limited in scope. But the problem is we don't have any other mentions of Jesus like in his lifetime period. That's the big problem. Besides the very few contentious stuff that's out there, it's less than the number of fingers on my hand, right? The sources there, and they don't say much, even the ones that people do account for as being legit, right? Talking about Josephus and stuff, right? So, this is now we're getting into some questionable stuff here, Zod. I'm getting some questions. That's all.
I would say this is more than questionable. I would say this is almost like just completely discrediting, in my opinion. Like, number one, yes, he's doing this, the number of historical references to Jesus thing. And if you discredit Jesus, you have to discredit everybody else, which number one, well, he said cast doubt on. Number one, you should cast doubt on almost anybody in history to some extent. History is full of doubt. We don't really know much in detail about the past. And so who people are, how they're presented in text and stuff like that, as far as I know, is generally almost always going to be up for question. History is kind of trying to focus in on a fuzzy picture and get some level of, I wouldn't even say certainty, but some idea what happened, but there's always gonna be some uncertainty to it. And Christians act like they should have this super sharp picture of everything that happened in Jesus's life and know exactly what he said to the point of believing he did miracles. So there's an apples and orange comparison. But beside that, claiming that we're just going to we get our picture of everybody in history from the number of manuscripts about them or the amount of documentation about them is just complete horseshit. And not only is it wrong, it's just obviously wrong in a way that he should know better than to even suggest. And so this shows me that, because there's all kinds of other things, like Kip said, there are statues of people. Like you said, there's all kinds of documentation from that time about things that definitely happened because they existed. Comparing when their biographies happened, when they were written in history, and how many copies are, it's just completely irrelevant. And he has to know it. Anybody with common sense knows it. If you're a scholar, you definitely know it. And so he's either segmented off some ignorant part of his brain to make room for this, or he's just lying about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're gonna go this route, right? Like, you have to talk to people. Don't talk to like the Billy Carsons of the world. Like, you have to talk to like Richard Carrier and people, right? Because like even the most intellectually honest people, and I would say Richard Carrier is intellectually honest. If you actually read his books, right, and he presents his ideas about Jesus not existing, he will tell you the weaknesses of his own position, and he will tell you like, here's why you should believe that Jesus is real. Like, here are the good points, here are the bad. Like, there are people who he's one of those few who really does the work and will show you. And yet even he is like, okay, I'm only on this position because it seems like it's a more than 50-50 chance for him, but it's not even fully set, right? Those are the people who have actually done the work. Billy Carson and these other types, or whoever the fuck this lady is, because I'm sure she's not, her opinion doesn't really matter. She even said it, like, I think it's 100 years. She doesn't know for sure, right? Like, those are not the people you should be responding to if you want to make this like a legit conversation, right? Like, at least bring out the best arguments people have for this stuff, because this happens every single time the whole "does Jesus exist" thing comes up with apologists. They always steamroll them with, oh, here's the historical consensus, and here's all the citations, and here's blah blah blah. So, you know, it just, you know, it's a cheap trick on it, and he's not the first apologist to do it. A lot of apologists do it.
And aside from that, he called the 4 gospel writers biographers, which again, you know better than that.
Yeah.
And the 20-year date thing is just silly. But aside from the fact that this is just completely absurd, what I find remarkable is it is just straight out of the box apologetics. Like, he didn't do anything to like alter these ideas or refine them. They don't represent any kind of scholarly work or thought, and they didn't have to. It's just like he put this in the exact same words as every other basic apologist before, and that's just why I find really silly.
Yeah, I agree. Also, did you know that we're betas? I think maybe because we're talking about, we're talking about Wes Huff, so we're getting all the nice Christian love in the chat right now. Isn't that great?
Yeah, remember how I said that if you said a word sideways about William Lane Craig, then all the followers would just be totally unsettled by it and come and insult you? I guess we're seeing more of this phenomenon play out in real time right now. So
we love to see it. We love to see it, folks. Of course, I chose a day. People are saying I look like Beast from X-Men right now, just because I wore a white shirt and some glasses today. Y'all are wild today, chat.
I could see that actually.
I'll take it as a compliment, honestly.
Oh yeah.
But anyway,
all
let's keep going. Yeah.
Were not eyewitnesses to Jesus. Matthew and John were part of his inner circle. Luke states right off the bat that he himself was not an eyewitness, but that he had painstakingly sought out, interviewed, and recorded the tellings of those who were. Every piece of ancient testimony about the gospel authors testify to a direct connection with the earliest Jesus community. Matthew and John were disciples. Luke interviews eyewitnesses and provides his receipts. And all of the earliest testimony about the identity of who Mark is from the ancient world states that he was a traveling companion of Peter the disciple, and wrote down what Peter had told him about his time when he was with Jesus. If we compare this to other figures from antiquity, we see why this is so important. Alexander the Great, for example, also had 4 biographies written about his life. The earliest and most reliable one of these.
Okay, he's kind of just trailing
on here. This is if this is supposed to be a short, this is a bad short. I'm just saying, Wes, here's a tip. If you want to do this whole response thing, you got to make this under 60 seconds, my man. This is too much. And then have people link to the full video or something. I don't know.
But he's just carrying on about the you know, how many biographers did they have? When did they write it?
Right.
It's just pathetically basic apologetic stuff.
Yeah.
It's like our good friend J. Warner Wallace. He took his whole detective shtick and then basically just tacked on apologetics in the exact same word as everybody else said. And you know where they hit that line where they go from their personal showmanship to the just out of the can arguments everybody's been making since the beginning of time. Wes is the same way. He has the showmanship aspect of what he does, which is really the whole thing that makes him unique. But then all of a sudden, once he gets on the talking points, word for word, the exact same silly thing everybody's been saying since the beginning of apologetics.
Right.
It's remarkable.
So I'm scrubbing back here because I want to find where he had that up about the Luke part. Hold on.
Matthew and John were disciples. Luke interviews eyewitnesses and provides his receipts. And all of the earliest testimony about the identity of who Mark is from the ancient world states that Luke, the gospel authors, that he had painstakingly sought.
Okay, here we go. Oh yeah. So here he says
sought out, interviewed, and recorded.
Painstakingly sought out, interviewed, and recorded eyewitnesses, right? That's what he just said. Yeah. Let's read that quote. Many have undertaken to drop an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and the servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. Okay, so where in that sentence does it say he painstakingly interviewed first-person accounts from people? So this is what happens when apologists do your thinking for you, right? And you don't read the Bible yourself, because that's not what that says. In fact, if anything, what Luke is implying there is that he's hearing third-hand accounts that he is then writing down himself. right? It says stuff that's, I mean, obviously we're talking about an English translation. I don't know what the original fucking Greek says, but like, you know, that doesn't look like first person accounts to me. I don't think Luke was doing citizen journalism on this story, but you know,
especially considering that this is a religious text that has theological goals and it's built for a religious community at that time, basically a kind of a tight-knit cult.
mm-hmm.
This doesn't have anything to do with your credibility. This is just a religious leader protesting a little too hard about how he really, really looked into things.
Right.
And so again, for Wes to buy into this and have somebody say, well, look, guys, I really, really looked into this, and here's what I found about our religious leader, to take that as showing any kind of credibility.
Yeah.
Again, he has to know better than this. And if whether he's being dishonest or just compartmentalizing a part of ignorance in his mind, he's just using this platform to serve completely vanilla, out of the box, boring apologetics.
Right. I mean, we have first person accounts of people who have talked to Joseph Smith. Wow. Doesn't that make you think Mormonism is more real? In fact, we have way more accounts of Joseph Smith. And so we have people who were believers of Joseph Smith their entire life, right? Until death. Right.
Did you watch that sarcastic video about that sarcastic skeptic or whoever it was about that?
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Somebody made this whole video about that connection. It was really recently in responding to Wes Huff.
Yeah, but like obviously like so the Jesus existing thing is a gateway for apologists to introduce people to the harder stuff, right? Yeah. This is for like the average Joe Schmo that doesn't know much about the whole Jesus existing issue, to kind of really reel them to their side, because like that's the strongest thing apologists have. Honestly, that's like one of their strongest sort of bait and switches, is talking about the existence of Jesus, because there's so much out there to lend credence to that position, right? To like already get you to that part, which is like, again, not even the place where most skeptics are going to be arguing from. Yes, there are some, and there is some serious people, I would say, debating that idea, but it's not where most people are, at least in our space, right? So
yeah.
And
whether there's a historical Jesus, I think Kip said he thinks there is a Jesus, and the evidence is still sketchy, or the record's sketchy. That's what I think. There might be some guy or some collection of guys that it's alluding to, but we know basically nothing reliably about them because the historical record is very thin. Thank you for bringing that up, Dan.
Yeah, we got Mark Frankenberry giving us $20. Thank you so much for the 20. Saying, I'm late to the show, but I wanted to say that I love your new channel, Mr. Zod, and I really appreciate what you and Dan do for our community. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you,
Mark. I'll try to skip back to where we were. I think that was like right around it.
I think we can trail off there. He's just carrying on about the same thing.
Okay, good.
But I want to watch
this video anymore.
I do want to watch
boring real quick, huh?
I do want to watch the beginning of this now that we've kept in mind how he sits there scanning.
Okay.
Watch the showmanship at the beginning of this when he's watching these people, because I think this is very staged, and I think this is picking over style over substance, but I think that's important because it shows.
Well, it's obviously scripted. He obviously wrote this down.
But he's cultivating style in it. But considering how scripted it is, once he starts talking, watch the way he acts at the beginning.
Oh, you mean so he's pretending to react to it for the first time.
Yeah, watch his face
and
the way he reacts.
There's people that say yes, there's historical documents that show he existed, and then there's a bunch of documentaries that you can watch. So like, boy, the evidence is kind of sketchy.
Gospels that are written about Jesus were written after, right? Not during.
And how long after his death?
Well, I think the first one was like 100 years. You know, Gospels were not written by anyone who had seen Jesus in that way.
I just noticed there's a cut there too.
They were the versions of when you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the versions that they were told. So I don't know, maybe 100 years?
Historical data concerning Jesus.
Okay, so watch this. He's sitting there. There's a lot of show to how he sits there watching it, like with this casual disdain, like he's kind of taking it in, chewing his gum, looking around. He does his little move where he pulls his mic over to him. Okay, I'm going to say something now. And then there's a hard cut to where he's sitting here clearly reading a script off a screen. So it looks to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it looks to me like he's staging this thing where he's just sitting there listening to him and then pulls his mic over and starts responding. But considering the fact that this whole thing is completely written out, he didn't just sit there and listen to them and pull a mic over and start talking. he's reading this off a script, and so he went out of his way to film himself reacting to them while they're talking, and to make it look like he has all this swagger and he's responding.
Yeah,
it's not like it's a bad thing to do. It might just be, we all do little things for showmanship and effect and everything. On, like you said, a lot of this is just YouTuber stuff. So I'm not totally shitting on him for this, but I think it does show something about how he builds a little bit of a style to him, about how he makes these, boss moves or whatever by
right.
It's just a lot of, I think he cultivates a lot of this showmanship, which is the main thing that's driving the phenomenon behind him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the debate lord energy. It's the debate perverts, right? The people who are interested in owning people and making other people look stupid and winning through, the rules of debate. The debate perverts, as it's been called.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of audience I'm seeing that would like that kind of thing. Specifically, the Christian debate perverts, the worst kind. Some would say.
As Curious Nerd Kid has said, potentially misleading editing to make it look live. That's you're probably picking up the same thing I did.
Right.
Wes, if you're watching this, and I know you are, you're probably watching us live right now, and you're probably going to rewatch this later.
Oh man,
if you're going to
live, oh man,
if you're going to do something like that, don't read from a screen where everybody can see your eyes scanning. At least get a teleprompter. If you're going to make it look like you're listening and then responding live, don't eye scan and then have a bunch of jump cuts. It destroys the effect.
Or that's just start talking the first part into camera and you do a cut anyway to some graphic or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But
anyway.
Just don't do the eye scanning thing. It makes you look fake.
Yeah, you're really bothered by that. I didn't even notice it, to be honest. But yeah.
No, it's annoying. It looks stupid. It makes you not only can you see their eyes scanning and you control their reading, it just makes you look kind of vacant when you're talking. It destroys a lot of the effect of camera facing videos, in my opinion.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
All right. Should I stop talking about that nonsensical stuff?
No, it's I mean, if I want to see it, because I know you have some more stuff you want to show me, right?
Yeah. Let's watch. This one's called Onomastic Congruence, how the Bible's names show the Bible's accuracy.
Onomastic congruence.
Onomastic congruence. Yeah.
It must be one of them big fancy theologian words that I don't know much about. I'm just a simple country folk.
If you mention that word in front of a lay audience, much less put it at the first word of the title of your video, I have to suspect you're trying to impress people with your big words.
That's what I'm saying. It's the debate people. It's the debate people that want to seem smart and own people and get their talking points from people, right? That's the market.
I will disagree with you about one thing, though.
Okay.
The worst debate perverts are not Christians. The very worst ones are within the atheist agnostic community, and I'm not going to name their names because
you know what though? You're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong, and I know exactly who you're talking about.
I know. I'm thinking about a very specific one who was involved in a big controversy, and I'm not saying his name because he would have a massive orgasm. The moment his name was said live.
Oh yes, you're so right about that. So yeah, we'll keep that to ourselves.
I want to give Christians the credit when they can. They are not the worst debate perverts. I'm just going to say that.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Let's go. Onomastic congruence, if I'm saying the right word wrong.
Scholarly studies has shown that though Jews were located in many places across the Roman Empire, people's names often tended to be geographically located. By observing literary and archaeological artifacts, a list of common names can be clearly identified. By narrowing down the most popular names in places that Jesus lived, traveled, and ministered, and by comparing these to the list from the studies, an interesting correlation can be seen. Just as we see today with popular names, a qualifier or nickname is often used. For example, notice that when Matthew lists the disciples in his gospel, certain names have a qualifier or nickname and others do not. Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. As we would expect, the most popular names are those that have an added description. When we compare the most popular names in Judea and Galilee during the first century with names we see listed in key places in the biblical Gospels, we find that all the names with qualifiers match with what we'd assume if they were actually written in the time and place they claim to be narrating. In contrast, the Gospel of Judas only...
Wait, Hold on. So what is the argument here? Is the argument that the accounts are more accurate because it's more people that were named those names were popular at that time?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull this video off. It's
Okay.
boring.
Okay.
But that showed something on it. Remember how I said that they go from their like technical talk or their actual shtick to suddenly making an apologetic move?
Yeah.
Here he suddenly shifts it on it. He kind of soft sells the apologetic move in this one, but his argument shivers. I just faded out.
I know that was like the most boring fucking video for like a minute or so. I was like, oh my god, I hope Zod is gonna pause and give me some commentary in a second here, because I'm having trouble paying attention even to what's happening.
But that's the thing. I don't know how accurate that all is. Again, that's where I'm not an expert. But assuming that that's true, and he's speaking from a place of expertise. Good job, Zod. He's just describing the technicalities of how names were back then and stuff like that. So he lectures on that, and then he shifts to this argument, which is just that the Gospels were probably accurate because they got the names of the people in the region correct. That's basically where he's going with that.
I thought, okay, like unless we can pin to particular, like, oh, in 30 AD, the names were differently popular than in 60 AD or in 70 AD. Like I'd be very surprised if we had that level of data. I thought he was going to go there and be like, oh, it was more popular to this specific, time period or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're
right,
saying it's literally just, oh, some people had these names around this time, and that's it.
Yeah. I'm going to bring Kip Davis up to help explain it in a less stupid way than I probably did. The argument is that the ratio of name distribution in the Gospels matches statistics for Roman Palestine, suggesting that the Gospels are historically accurate reportage. That's basically what I was getting from it. I just didn't.
Okay. Well, again, I'm sure if look, the people who were around David Koresh, they had names that were popular with Americans in Waco in the 90s. Like, yeah, that's true. That doesn't mean that David Koresh did anything he said. Like, who the fuck cares? Why was that calling into question? Is that literally just because, is this just another argument for the whole Jesus not existing thing? Or is this like, what is this even demonstrating? I'm so confused by this.
So one part of this, and we're not going to sit here and watch the whole thing, but he starts comparing it to other gospels, like I think the Gospel of Judas or something like that, and says that it had names all over the place where the canonical gospels had more accurate names.
Okay.
So if you want
okay, well that would so that makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah,
that makes more sense.
This is where we have to be careful. It's like with the Billy Carson thing.
Yeah,
sure, this guy just totally slam dunked on a complete jackass who believes in conspiracy theories and disbelieves the Bible for stupid reasons.
Okay, yeah,
great, but does that prove anything about the Bible and Jesus being God and stuff like that? No. In this case, yeah, he can probably show that some of these gospels have more accurate names than other ones. But does that prove anything about Jesus being God and God existing and miracles happening and stuff? No. So I don't know how I feel like in this video, he insinuates it. This is an argument for the reliability of the gospel. Because again, like you said, historicity of Jesus is the first selling point to get you into the hard stuff. And I feel like that's what this is doing too. He's trying to, you could see it as just a defensive argument against people claiming that the non-canonical gospels are a viable alternative. But whether he's trying to insinuate it or not, you have to be on guard against people trying to take this as him being good at actual apologetics in the sense of proving God. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Either he's muddying his message to make it sound like he's proving God, or he didn't, and people are still going to take from that he's actually good at proving God when all he's doing is nitpicking over which manuscript is more accurate. The gospel's getting names right. Great. You might have drawn from oral tradition that was like, passing these names around or something like that. And yeah, maybe you came only 4 or 5 decades after the fact instead of a century after the fact. Does that have anything to do with the stories being accurate, much less God being real?
Yeah, I get, like I said, if that was to talk about differences between like the 4 canonical gospels versus like other extra biblical accounts, I could see that making more sense just because the extra biblical gospels tend to be like way later written in time. So like, I guess there's something to that there, but it's also just circumstantial as well at the end of the day. Like it's just not, it's a boring point, which is the worst crime it can commit, but also it's just like so non-essential. Doesn't really matter. Who cares?
So it's a worse crime. It commits the crime of being boring in the sense that you're not going to draw an audience just for doing that, but it's boring in a scholarly, smart sounding way, which is reassuring for Christians. Even if they're not going to want to sit and watch all that, you've still produced some branding for yourself that makes it sound like you're smart and gives Christians a reassuring feeling about you. And, you know, I like what Chris Sears said here. The argument is like claiming you saw a UFO while getting gas and used a gas station receipt as proof.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that is pretty good. Yeah, they think it's so. Apologists love, and I'll just make this point, and then we move on. You know, apologists love. Like I remember talking about this. I think you talked about this on your channel. Who was it that was talking about like, oh, you know, we can talk about. There's this one passage in Matthew that describes pillars by this building, and we know that this building had pillars to it or whatever. It's just like the most banal like details that somehow make everything about the gospel accounts true. I don't know. It's very far reaching. The apologists have to go because they have to. I guess this is what you do when you try to make something new out of a 2,000-year-old story. But
and again, I want to make a point clear. It can sound like we're nitpicking over everything he does. And to some extent, I guess we are. And some of that's legitimate. But to some extent, you just have to think about what he actually did. And again, did he actually do anything that proves Jesus? When he gets into that realm, is he doing anything new? And why do they think this is a big deal? The fact that they are so sucked in by style over substance. A better way to put it is if I'm criticizing style, it's not that I don't think using these stylistic flourishes aren't necessarily legitimate. I think it can be misleading to a point, but if he wants to do certain gestures to put on a show and make himself look dramatic, everybody does that to some extent. It's not necessarily meant to mislead people. But if that's if that packaging is what's getting everybody's attention, then that tells us something about what kind of phenomenon he is. Like if the style is what's making him into a star, and that makes everybody feel like he's proving Jesus better than anybody else did, when all he's doing is making the same stupid, mundane arguments. Again, this isn't just to totally tear down Wes and all that kind of stuff. It's more what phenomenon are we looking at here?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
You want to watch one more video? This is the This is the one where he just like, those two are his attempts at proving God, which I find extremely underwhelming. And worst of all, just completely straight out of the box. But this one is just where he starts talking about weird stuff, which I find kind of embarrassing for somebody of his at least claimed credentials.
Ready for you. Ready and waiting.
Wes Huff talks biblically about angels, Book of Enoch, and the Ethiopian Bible. We won't watch this whole thing, but we at least got to get started on this.
Give it to me. Tell me about the angels, Wes.
Yeah. Before this show, Dan was mentioning something about talking about Christians talking about their thing is like people talking about Dungeons and Dragons. That reminded me of this just to set the stage.
Oh yeah.
Scripture occasionally refers to supernatural beings, like angels, like seraphim, like cherubim, like demons. But it doesn't really, or the Watchers is another one.
Jinn?
No,
that's different.
That's
Islam?
Yeah, that comes along. That's about 600 years after.
Beck Lover somewhere is like Julian.
Yeah, no, the jinn are a separate thing. They're
got it
entirely. They're good and bad jinn. They're not even in this sort of category. But so you have these.
You're talking about the completely wrong magical creatures. That's not
right.
in my. That's not in my mythical universe.
Oh my God. We just need to get on some stupid podcast, bro. And we're going to look like the smartest fucking people, dude. We're going to look like the smartest guys. That's all it takes. That's all it takes.
No, they'll just think we're basic and mainstream. They won't think we're smart.
I'm assuming, by the way, that this isn't Wes's studio. He's being interviewed in this other guy's studio. Can we talk about? So we got The Godfather, and I see, that's not Spider-Man in the bottom left. Is that Sam Raimi? That looks like Sam Raimi walking down the street. No, that's from a different movie. I'm trying to see what we got going on here.
This has a lot of.
We got Mad Men. Yeah, but then
what is a lot of Casa Mojo Dojo vibe to it.
Yeah, but why is Leonardo DiCaprio from the fucking Great Gatsby on there? That's what I really want to point out. Was the Great Gatsby movie that awesome enough to put a fucking picture up there like that? Okay. Maybe that's me. Or is that Wolf on Wall Street? Is that Wolf on Wall Street?
That's Great Gatsby. That's the
Great
one
Gatsby, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one where they tried to capture the smile that Nick said was so captivating in the book.
Right. Was that movie really that good? Okay.
Oh, it sucked ass. As
somebody saying, like, I didn't think it was that good.
I taught Great Gatsby in high school for years, and that movie was just like it felt like half the story on fast forward without any of the substance.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just my ADHD looking at the background there. But anyway, we can keep watching the video.
These things mentioned in the Old Testament, but they're never really explained. And so within this 400-year period between the Old and the New Testament, the Jews are like, okay, what do we think of this? How are we to understand these supernatural beings that are created by God, that exist in some sort of parallel world in the unseen realm, and they're interacting with one another, and they have different forms and functions. So one of the issues is that we often refer to a bunch of these things as angels. Angel is not what the thing is, it's what the thing does. So malach in the Hebrew, or angelos in the Greek, means messenger. So it is not a description of its ontology, what it is, it's a description of what it does.
Got it.
These are supernatural beings who go and they communicate messages to people. They're in some sort of relation in terms of their supernaturalness to other creatures like the seraphim and like the cherubim.
Does this just sound totally stupid to you?
It's just like, well, what the Bible says, we need to talk about the ontology of these beings. They are just messengers. Okay, yeah, supernatural messengers. Got it. Okay. Did we need to discuss that? Sure. We're still talking about magic stuff, right? Magic beings. You're just making it sound smarter. But that's, it is what it is, right?
A lot of this is just, it feels like it's nitpicking things that are common usage too.
Yeah.
Like it would be like, I used to teach Greek mythology. My son got me into this game, Hades. I don't know if you've heard
Hades
of that
is
one.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm friends, by the way. One of my best friends from high school is one of the top speed runners in Hades.
Oh, wow.
So that's a thing. Anyway, fun fact.
But it would be like me making a point of the fact that Hades is the name of the god, not the underworld, when people call the underworld Hades. It's like, it's some of the stuff has come into common usage. And is this really an important point to make? I don't know. We use the word angels in common usage now in English to describe the supernatural beings who appear. I feel like he missteps a little bit when he says angel is what they do, not who they are. It'd more be, I think, who they are in terms of their job than whatever.
Well, I'm picking up on what you were talking about earlier, Zod, which is just that there's a little bit of showmanship going on here. Like, you didn't have to start off talking about angels being messengers or whatever, but I guess you still have to, because like you're trying to make the idea of angels sound more cohesive than they really are, because it's still a fucking mess, right? Like, it still doesn't make any sense. It still contradicts itself all over the place on what the fuck angels actually are. But sure, we can just agree that they're all messengers of some kind, whatever, which is okay, whatever.
Who are
and
supernatural divine.
I guarantee that functionally, this explanation would have worked just as well if the word ontologically had never entered into it. Like, he's throwing that word in there just to.
Yeah, well, apologists love ontological stuff.
Oh yeah,
that's a fact. Anyway, I'll let you hit pause because you're the guy today that hits pause.
And throne guardians, which was a concept that was not foreign to the ancient world. You have Lamassu, which are the winged bulls with the human heads in Babylon, and you have sphinxes in Egyptian and Hellenistic culture. These were just concepts that existed within the ancient world. The gods have throne guardians. And within biblical Judaism, these are the seraphim and they are the cherubim. So sometimes you'll see those memes, the biblically accurate angels.
Yeah.
Those are cherubim.
So here, this is interesting. This textual scholar, whatever his qualifications are, apparently he has some kind of qualification. He's working on a PhD or something like that. He notices that these throne guardians are common in the Middle East, right?
Yes.
They were common in the Middle East. And that the Hebrews had them too. Does it never occur to him to think, if he had his scholar hat on and was thinking it all critically, that this is just one more manifestation of this kind of lore in Judaism? I don't know. It's just kind of weird. He goes from talking about credible things to just being completely credulous when it comes to any kind of biblical belief. Never mind. I don't think the idea of throne guardians is really that congruent with the current idea of an all-powerful, all-knowing God, right? Like, what does an omniscient God need a throne guardian for?
Right. But also, like, maybe he's going to get to this too. Like, it does annoy me, like, when you see the memes about the biblically accurate angel stuff, right? Because it's like, it is more complicated, and like it is deserving of more study. But like, he's really front loading it here with the cherubim and seraphim stuff, because, like, first of all of this stuff is extra biblical, right? Specifically, it's talking about like Jewish ancient texts, I believe sometimes even Gnostic texts, right? Talking about the hierarchy of angels and stuff. So what I'm trying to say here is, this is fan fiction. This is fan fiction to the Bible, okay, which is already a fan fiction in itself. But we're talking about fan fiction to the fan fiction. So you can present it like these are biblical ideas, but they aren't. You will not find those words. You will not find that hierarchy accurately described in anything that the Bible says. If you take these other ancient Jewish writings to be factual, that's fine. But how the fuck do these people know about it that came up with this hierarchy? I don't know. Did God give them a message and explain to them the administrative organization of angels? I don't think so. I think it's people trying to make sense of these stories and try to, come up with it. Because again, it doesn't actually, I positively identify, this angel that guarded the Garden of Eden, this kind of angel and stuff like that. So we're already getting into, extra biblical stuff here, even though I thought we were talking about the Bible, but I guess not.
Well, and Kip said he hasn't said anything dumb yet, which maybe he hasn't in terms of describing this. But what I think is weird is that he's describing all this like just crazy sounding mythology as if it's totally real. That's the part that I just find.
Yeah. You're hung up on what should be immediately obvious, which is just like, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons level of lore about real life. I guess real life.
Yeah, if you want to break down how the dragons work, or maybe Dungeons and Dragons isn't a perfect analogy because they don't have like a built-in lore. But if you want to talk about exactly how all the Marvel superheroes powers work, and who shoots what rays how hard, and who could beat who, and all the technicalities of it, it's a little dorky, but that's fine, But if you're talking about it like they're outside your house, then you kind of have a problem, and I am wondering about you. So go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's where I feel like this just feels really strange and off the rails. He's talking about all these things as if these creatures are actually flying around everywhere and guarding thrones and stuff like that. And he doesn't make the connection that the ones he believes in rose up in an area where this was a common motif. Maybe think about the cause and effect there.
It is very strange that, it's just like, but these other ones, the Sphinx and stuff, that shit's fake. Right? Like, but my stuff's real. Like, and like the thought that I was interjecting there, again, my ADHD just kind of popped into my head as you were speaking. I promise you I was listening. Was like, UFO communities also do this, and I've talked about this before. Like, so there are different hierarchies of sort of different UFO beings. There's like the Draco race and the fucking I can't even remember, but basically like the elvish kind of people. So like, and this kind of hierarchy also is like a post hoc sort of deal of people describing their Pleiadians. That's what I'm thinking of, Pleiadians. Like, there's different races that are sort of canon within UFO communities, because it's people sort of retroactively describing other people's UFO experiences and then trying to categorize them into this sort of mythos. And it's very clear that's like what's true with like the angel stuff, right? It's just people trying like after the fact to figure out like what the fuck does it mean when this angel does this or this angel does that. So yeah, we're talking about like UFO levels of of thinking here is all I'm trying to say. Is just like this is the same sort of logic we're operating on. The only difference is this happened 2,000 years ago, so it must be legit, right?
Yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
That's what they are.
Okay.
It's not actually an angel. It's kind of a misnomer in terms, but I get it because we kind of broad brush with all these categories. The Book of Enoch is part of the literature that's trying to explain that. What on earth is this? Actually, if you go back to my wesleyhuff.com, I do, so every Monday I do these posts that I call Manuscript Monday. So if you go back to the homepage,
Can I get the plug in?
click that, scroll down, you'll see the blog post. Keep going. Right there. So biblically accurate angels. So I actually explain some of these. If you go down, go up, right there. So like angels, seraphim, cherubim, and then how these are portrayed. And I particularly go through the manuscripts and how both Christian and Jewish interpretation of them reflects them differently. But these are these characters which the Book of Enoch is trying to make sense of, along with demons. And so the way that they go about that is by capitalizing on the events that happen immediately before Genesis chapter 6 and the biblical flood, where you have the great-grandfather of Noah, Enoch, as this character who is explaining some of these fallen angels or beings. Genesis chapter 6 says that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were pleasing to the eyes and slept with them. And that these created men of renown. And that's the word Nephilim.
Ah, there it is.
So the trickiness of this is that in ancient Judaism, when it's translated.
Okay, I think we can cut off there.
Yeah.
I love when he brings up the Nephilim thing too.
Right.
Like, this is like complete, I don't know, this is like Greek mythology level bullshit. Like, the gods came down and had sex with women, and then that's where the heroes came from, you know? Achilles and Theseus and Perseus, they're all here doing their deeds of renown in ages of yore because the gods came down and slept with people.
Yeah.
Like, this is seriously what he's talking about, and he's taking it seriously. So I don't know. There's not much more in this. I didn't want to watch the entire video here.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd have to see what the rest of this video is saying, because like he's describing the Book of Enoch, which if you're not familiar is an extra biblical book, right? That's kind of written after most of the New Testament's been written, and is trying to, again, as he said, like talk about the character Enoch, and it goes into some of the angel Nephilim stuff, right? So like I'm assuming he's explaining how the Book of Enoch is bullshit, because that's what most Christians say. But again, it is funny to be like, oh, well, the Book of Enoch, we know that story's not legit because it was written later, but the actual story of Enoch and the flood and stuff, like, oh, that's legit. Like, that's real. You know, it's like this arbitrary picking and choosing of like what's real and what's not, which is pretty fascinating to see.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I found this video fascinating. It's not that I have any specific argument with how he represents the lore. I don't know enough to even have an argument against it. But watching, this is all just kind of the progression of who he is as a public character in his very short time just being a big name. It's the fact that he got this reputation for being just this brilliant apologist who presumably just knows how to handle skeptics, and he's the invincible guardian of the faith or defender of the faith, and just for destroying a complete crank on a debate. That's what set him off. And then he appeared on Joe Rogan and was just very charismatic and put on a good show. But behind all that, his arguments for God, just to be frank, are complete ass. Not only that, he just I keep using the word straight out of the box, but I don't know a better word for it. He's pulling word for word exactly what all the apologists say. He's just pulling it out and repeating it almost verbatim. He didn't come up with that stuff on his own. He got that out of the apologetic sphere, whether he consciously listened to them from other people or repeated it, or whether that's just the body of knowledge that he's immersed in. He spent time not only in his scholarly field, but just listening to these apologists and he's just completely regurgitating them whenever he wants to address the question of Jesus's existence. And I find it just pathetic. And it's just weird how selective he is in the mentality he allows himself to have and the way he allows himself to think, which I guess is mostly the same thing. But then also I see that reflected in the fact that he can just sit here and talk about these just completely crazy ass supernatural beings as if they're real. And you can parse out which are messengers and which are throne guardians and which are the demigod heroes of old. It's just, I don't know, it's moronic. And I just find it very strange from somebody who's supposed to have an air of credibility about him to hear him talk like that. I guess that's my point.
No, I hear you. I'd be curious to hear his actual arguments for God, because I don't think he's actually made an argument for God specifically. I don't know if he did on the Joe Rogan show. I didn't end up listening to all of it. But I will point out this right here from Kip Davis, because they are correcting me. Enoch is not extra biblical everywhere. The Ethiopian church loves it. Also, Enoch was written before Book of Daniel. That's true. Can't forget about the Ethiopian church. They got all the fun books. Also, you're right. It is before. It is BC. I thought it was sometime AD, but it's not. I must be thinking of something else. But yeah, it is one of the older sort of not older, because there's other older ones than that. But anyway, I was wrong. Sorry. But thank you, Kip, for correcting me.
This is where we can be technically incorrect on a meaningful way, but still allude to what evangelical Christians are going to mean. Evangelical Christians are going to call that an extra biblical or non-biblical book, just because it's not within their canon that they think is the one inspired word of God. So yeah, I think it's a good correction. It's good to bring that stuff up. But on the other hand, I think what you say is just as meaningful if you're talking to an evangelical Christian. That's gonna communicate exactly what they think is as anti-biblical or extra biblical.
Yeah, to the average American Christian that doesn't understand that Christianity is actually a way broader tradition than they might think it is. Yeah, definitely. Also, this is interesting. Kip is saying West Side of Lydia McGrew is an authority on the Gospels in the historical Jesus. Yep, that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all. So, okay, fun stuff.
We have
happening there.
We have a question. We have 20 minutes here without a lot of more material to cover. Ways the Human asked, does Baggy have an opinion on this Wes character? Should I go step aside and see if Baggy has anything to say about this?
Sure. Yeah, if you want to.
Okay. It might take me a minute. Can you give me a minute? Can you entertain everybody for a second?
If Baggy has a minute, I suppose.
Yeah. Rant a little bit about this whole thing, and I'll be right back.
Here's me ranting about this whole thing a little bit. So we're seeing some clips. We're not seeing Wes's. I haven't seen a full video from Wes yet, right? I'm just seeing what Apologist talked about with him, and then now Zod, and then also a little bit of the Joe Rogan thing. So, maybe there's some other stuff out there I'm missing, but I can't imagine it's much more than what we've seen before from other apologists in terms of the whole God thing. Again, if you focus on these minute things, the account for angels is it's more academic than what you might think, or the account for Jesus is more academic than you might think, then you're going to win over some people regardless. You're going to win over people who don't actually read books for themselves, or even just read original sources for themselves, right? Who get all their information from podcasts and just pick up talking points to win over debates with their friends and make people feel smarter than they really are, right? So that's always going to be a market, and it seems like maybe Wes is pushing on that a little bit, but that's YouTube for you. That's the name of the game right here, baby. Just making cool video essays and I don't know, arguing your opinions in between stock footage and some graphics, and that's it. You're an intellectual now. Hooray! Doesn't matter how much you've actually published in real serious papers or contributed to the academic body. You can just be the next Jordan Peterson. And that's the world that we live in. So anyway. Hello. Baguette.
Hey there, Dan.
Is that your full name, Baggy? Is it Baguette?
No.
Oh, okay.
My name's just Baggy.
Okay. I thought that'd be funny as a bit, but that's okay.
Baguette is my cousin who lives in another country.
That's my cousin. That's my fancy
You know what
cousin.
country he lives in, Dan?
What country does he live in, Becky?
Yes.
Ethiopia.
No.
Well, I mean, it's France is too obvious. So what is it? Unless you're gonna say it's France. Is it France or no? You know, they say the secret to improv is always just, it's not yes and it's just no, right? You just give me a bunch of no's and we can just improv from there, right, Zod? Is that
No.
Baggy? Okay.
No.
All right.
So Dan, Zod, when he went to pick me up just now, he said that you guys found a really, really, really smart guy, and he knows how to prove Jesus. And I know Jesus exists in my heart already.
Okay. Fair
I
enough.
have what William Blaine Craig calls the inner witness of the Holy Spirit in my heart.
Yeah.
And if you don't, well, no arguments are going to affect you.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Mhm.
the arguments still, ooh,
Baggy.
They just
Baggy, you need a lozenge? You all right, bud? You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, okay.
Those arguments, they just warm the cockles of my heart. And
The cockles, huh?
in the short time since Zod went and picked me up, I checked out this Wes Huff character. And wow. First of all, those muscles, have you seen it? Ooh. I am all aflutter.
That's great. That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you, Baggy.
That man knows how to wear a tight shirt. I'll tell you what.
I believe it. I believe it.
But then he talked to a skeptic, and that skeptic said some really silly things about
Did he
Jesus
now?
not being crucified in the book of Egypt.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Egypt, that's where my cousin Baguette's from. But anyway.
Oh, somebody said Baghdad, which is a way funnier joke. So
Baghdad's not a country, stupid. It's a
yeah, that's true.
So anyway, let's just get this knocked out.
Okay.
Wes Huff he proves Jesus existed.
Okay.
Because not only is he big and strong, not only does he have just a winning smile, not only is he really smart and really handsome and really smart,
Yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
he owns skeptics in a debate.
Right.
And did you see that one, Dan, where there was a book behind him and he reached back and got it?
Yeah.
And he showed the guy what was in it?
Yeah, he showed notable academic and scholar Billy Carson. He showed him his place for sure, Baggy. I agree with you. I think Wes Huff
I don't care if Billy Carson was a noted blah blah blah.
I'm gonna say this. I think Wes Huff is this next coming of Christ. I think he's the no. Okay. All right. It's your bit, I guess. Go off, King.
No, not the next coming of Christ.
Yeah.
Okay, say it, Dan. Sorry.
No, that's it. You ruined it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, Dan.
No, it's all right. It's all right, Baggy. It's okay.
Okay. Oh.
How much longer do I have to talk to a puppet? What are we doing here?
I'll go away.
No,
Okay.
Baggy, just say your piece. Say your piece. You really like Wes. You like Wes a lot. I get it.
Oh. Okay. Have you ever heard of a syllogism, Dan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Well, skeptics aren't good critical thinkers, so I just want to make sure. So
right. Makes sense. You have the prejudice.
Billy Carson's a skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
Wes Huff beat Billy Carson in a debate.
Right.
Therefore, Wes Huff can beat skeptics in a debate. Mic drop, bitches!
That's pretty good. That's a little text tone right there. Little Baggy saying mic drop, bitches. I like that. You stuck the landing on that. Good job. That was funny.
Yeah, that wasn't all my best baggy work. You just have to kind of go with a baggy flow. I didn't hit my stride, but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for speaking to your point, you mentioned, I heard you in my ear when I was grabbing baggy, that you haven't seen a lot of his work, and that this, you don't know if maybe he has better arguments out there somewhere. I don't think you probably suspect he does, but here's the thing to me. I haven't viewed the breadth of his work. I've watched several of his recent videos, but no matter what else he might say, the fact that he's capable of saying those things just, I don't know, it at least gives me pause if it doesn't fully discredit him in my mind. Like, if you have good arguments for God, you're not going to make those kinds of arguments. In fact, you're not going to make those kinds of arguments if you're a serious thinker in that realm. What these demonstrate, no matter what else he said, is that he is able to shut off a certain part of his mind or become deceptive when he wants to make apologetics arguments. And so I don't care what else he said. This is just a case study in the fact that he's capable of doing that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, if you have to go to make your case by talking about the study of name frequencies, right, in the time of writing, you may have stepped a bridge too far, right? Like, not saying that in other historical contexts that might prove some kind of point or whatever, right? But like, if we're just talking about something that should be pretty simple, is there a God or not? Like, he might laugh at that and say, oh, how could you say that's really simple? But it was simple to the folks who just like watched and saw Jesus, right? Like, yeah, maybe some of them had doubts because he probably wasn't God, and that's why you would have those kinds of doubts. But like, ostensibly, right? Like, at least if a miracle is out there, at least something like substantial was out there for us to investigate or look at and examine, then we wouldn't be having conversations about who said who 2,000 years ago, right? Like, it wouldn't matter. Like, God would just be around doing stuff, or angels would be giving us messages and stuff like that. But the fact is, we don't have that. We don't have publicly available messages from God. We only have private revelations from people who have occasionally been proven to be mentally questionable, right? And so it's like, what else do we have? What do we go at? We have to go back to angels and ancient biblical texts and stuff to make our case, because that's all they got. So yeah, I see your point there, where it's like, if he's he's going there because he has to, not because he's got anything better, right? It's just that's what you do when you're a part of that world.
And that second video was questionable if he's trying to present that as argument for God. But the one that really got me was the first video. The fact that he can go the route of the sheer number of documents that were copied about Jesus by a religious community. Number one, that has anything to do with historicity, much less that's the one measure you use to show that, we have more credible reason to believe in him than Alexander the Great or whoever else. That's just sheer asinine nonsense. And the fact that he pulls that out, not only shows he's just like stupid on that topic, but it also shows that he's just purely regurgitating in a really embarrassing way. And so I'm not going to say that he never is going to have anything good to say on the topic. I guess you can't close your mind to that possibility, but it does tell us something that he made these few videos that we watched today.
Yeah. The case isn't well made, at least to me so far. Maybe he, and when I was reading stuff about Wes, like, obviously everybody's written these sort of articles about him stuff. I was briefly reading today about some criticisms people had about Wes's response, Wes's take on Joe Rogan, because the evangelicals were like, well, you didn't give a call to action to Joe to like come to Christ, right? So there's this other subset of people who they don't give a shit about the academic stuff, right? Or at least like that should just be an appetizer to the main course, or to the main meal here, which is the call to action, the call to people's hearts to convert to Christ and stuff, right? Like, because that's the end game, that is the goal. And to my knowledge, he didn't do that on the show, and there's always going to be people that are going to be against that, because they think that apologetics is going to be a tool for conversion, That's what its existence is for. And to those people's credit, I mean, I think that's why apologetics is invented. It's not for academic or intellectual like curiosity or truth telling. It's to defend the faith, right? So there you go. But people who go on Joe Rogan or listen to Joe Rogan believe a lot of different things.
It does do one other thing, I think, that we might miss. We usually think of it as a purely inward exercise just to validate the faith of believers. And as a main function, I think that's what it does. But it does something else, especially when you get on big platforms like this, which is that it lends a little cover for the idea, especially right now when we're in probably a pre-theocratic authoritarian landscape. Having those ideas just floating out there lend a little bit of credibility, I think, to the harsher stuff. Like you said, proving Jesus is a gateway to other things, including other apologetics arguments. But all that lays the foundation for at least something people can allude to when they're telling you what to do for theocratic reasons. So yeah, it's all kind of not
the theocracy and dare I say fascism will in part be built by theobros who will use the Bible to justify every which way and what for their, awful ideas and motives. And Wes and these folks, they're never going to come onto the side of social justice, right? Like Wes is never going to make a video saying, hey, we need to actually defend gay people in their right to have marriage, for example, right? Like these folks who fall into the apologetics communities are always going to either side on the status quo or go more conservative than that. So just something to look forward to in the next few years as this continues to happen. But
apologetics is how they act when they need to be polite and beg for a little bit of validation. Fletcher from on high, $20. Helly is a mole. Interesting. You better not be giving spoilers, by the way, if that's starting tonight. I'm going to literally kill you if that's.
I swear to God. Wait, that's not tonight. It's tomorrow, isn't it?
I thought it was tomorrow night, but then somebody was saying it's tonight. But yeah.
Oh my God. I am going to watch it later though.
If that was
by the way, for people who don't know.
Thank you for the super chat and the $20. Hopefully that was just a fan theory and not telling us something that happened in season 2.
We'll have to censor that later.
Yeah.
True. Oh my God.
So
can I give a special shout out to Fungi Delight, who hasn't stopped yapping in the chat, who says that Mushroom Angels give us messages, and yes, they are available to God, but we can't be a coward. So maybe that's what we need to do, Zob. Maybe we need to take some mushrooms and we'll believe in God. What do you think about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah? You down?
No.
Oh. Not even for the video?
I'm not going to admit to planning anything of the sort on.
Think of the views, Zod. Think of the views. Don't you want the Mr. Zod channel to grow? This is how you do it.
Yeah, that would be like on Anchorman when they all smoked crack on the news. All right. Ready to wrap this up? We're a few minutes over.
I think so.
Yeah. I just my last little thought on this is I find it weird that he's willing to just pull these basic arguments out. But what I find even weirder is the fact that he's a phenomenon. And what that tells us is I don't think they care about the substance of the arguments. They just want to see style. And the fact not only these are bad arguments, but that they're the exact same thing shows me that the apologetics crowd is willing to just hear the same thing barfed back at them. And if it's done with a flourish, they just think it's great. And it's kind of pathetic. That's my last thought.
I'm a retweet. I'll retweet that.
All
I don't think I have anything else to add. So
like, comment, subscribe, everybody. We got to rush out of here. Have a really good night.
Later.
Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue y la casa de la bachata. Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue y la casa de la bachata. La casa del merengue, y la casa de la bachata.